Okay, so look what came in the mail today. Now, I know what this is. This is actually a really cool and new product from the folks over at Lippert, LCI. And I don't think most people who watch my channel would have expected that Lippert would produce one of these. So this is going to be really interesting. It's going to be a little different. And they may have sent it to the wrong reviewer, even though when I saw it, I was hoping they would send this to me for review and evaluation, because I'm kind of an enthusiast of what's in this box. But it's going to be really interesting to see if I'm impressed by what they did here. So hang tight, I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm still not sure what the thumbnail is going to be. I don't know if I want you to guess this or if I want you to just follow along until I open it up. But it's packaged very similar to other items that come in this type of a box. Not labeled. That's kind of interesting. It doesn't have a brand or anything on it. But yeah, let's get this thing torn open. This big workbench that I have out here has absolutely been great. We use this for just about every project now. So let's tear into this box and showcase what's inside. Okay, so here it is. This is the all-new Lippert Gladiator e-mountain bike, complete with kickstand. And I know to a lot of folks, the minute you see a kickstand, you're like, that's not a true mountain bike. Well, this honestly isn't really a true mountain bike. This is more of what I would consider to be a trail bike, right? Something you might ride on your normal trails. We have plenty of those down here in South Texas, but I can assure you we absolutely lack anything close to a hill or a mountain. But I can just take a quick hop, skip, and a jump up to San Antonio or Austin, head out west slightly where you hit hill country, and believe it or not, there are actually some really, really nice trails. Some very aggressive trails, and trails that I'm not 100% sure I would take this bike out on. However, it's got a pretty interesting story. And that story is, it's a mixture of components that will probably actually impress you if you're a bike enthusiast like myself. Now, a lot of people may or may not know that I am like really into mountain biking. I don't go nearly as much as I'd like, and even though it's called mountain biking, I don't think I ever actually do mountain biking because I don't have any mountains anywhere that are really close to me. It takes a pretty far trip for me to find a mountain. That said, there are plenty of pretty aggressive and pretty serious trails and hills that I can take this out on in some parts of Texas. Let me show you what I'm used to riding, and then we'll start taking this thing apart and putting it together. Okay, so I've shown most of my bikes in earlier videos that have been really bike focused, but this is kind of my go-to bike. This is a non-e-bike. This is a Santa Cruz Hightower, and this specific setup is almost ideally set up for me, right? It's got a very, very kind of aggressive stance to it, or geometry to it. Everything's been upgraded on this bike. I got the Fox 36 factory fork up front. It's running all X01 components back here. It's just a really, really good bike. It's all carbon fiber, one-up handlebars, carbon fiber crankset. It's got a dropper post on it. Like I said, everything has pretty much been upgraded on this bike. It's got race face gear all over it. And if you are a bike enthusiast, this is probably a pretty good bike in terms of what you might be looking for. Overall cost of a bike like this, as configured, is going to be about $7,500, almost $8,000 if you take it exactly as configured. And I also have an e-bike. Actually, I have a lot of e-bikes, but when it comes to like hardcore e-bikes, I have a Cannondale, which I actually revealed on this channel, and it was a pretty extreme Cannondale e-bike, or it's an e-mountain bike, and it's got all sorts of similar components to this. Fox up front, Fox in the middle, Maxxis tires. It's got, I believe I'm running X01 and GX drivetrain. But yeah, this is kind of what my expectation when it comes to a professional mountain bike is. So let's go back over to the Lippert bike and kind of talk about it a little bit. Okay, so back here at the Lippert Gladiator, I'm going to start assembling this, putting it all together. But right off the bat, there are some things that I actually really like about this bike. And let's go over a few of them that I can just spot right here. First of all, it's got a actual threadless stem up here, which is really nice as well. So this, if you don't know much about bikes, is what you want. You can replace this and upgrade it. You can go with all sorts of aftermarket stuff. But because of this setup, it gives me a lot of flexibility to upgrade the fork if I wanted to go to a better fork. Because the fork that's on here, believe it or not, isn't actually a bad fork. This is a fork that you get on a lot of entry-level mountain and trail bikes. And it's going to be a spring-loaded fork, so it's going to have an actual spring in there versus a gas fork like you see on some of your higher-end bikes. But this isn't what I would consider to be a bad fork. On a lot of bikes, or at least a lot of entry-level bikes, you have a really, really cheapy fork on it. So all that said, it's got some other really nice components that I can tell right off the bat. Another one is hydraulic disc brakes. I can see them through here. Disc brakes in general, but you're starting to see disc brakes on lower end bikes, so that's not a real big thing. Kickstand, I think that they just expect most people who would buy this bike would use a kickstand, but the more serious you get about biking, the more that thing is one of the first things you take off. But, everything being said, this is actually a pretty cool bike, and the fact that it is an e-bike. So again, let's get this thing completely unpackaged and put together so we can get a better idea of what it's all about. Okay, so I have pretty much all the zip tie, the packing foam, and the cardboard removed from the bike, so we get a little bit of a better idea of how it comes assembled. The battery pack is already pre-installed. There may or may not be a charge on it. I don't see a charge on it, so I'll probably have to charge this thing up. Typical to a lot of e-bikes, it has a key right here. It's actually covered, but yeah, this is how you would remove your battery pack. It probably just slides off, or it might actually be unlocked. All right. So the battery pack is now off, and again, pretty sure this thing needs to be charged. All right, so there's your battery pack. This is where your battery pack mounts. This is a hub-driven bike. It would have been really nice if it had a mid-mount motor right here, but yeah, it's a hub mount, which is pretty indicative of the price point that this is at. By the way, this bike I believe carries a $2,000 MSRP, like $1,999. And we'll talk about it a little bit more from a value perspective, because you may actually be a little blown away by the value you get with this bike, considering what you're capable of doing with it if you want to. And there's a lot behind that statement. So it's got I really don't know, Cloud 1, I think. I'm not sure what brakes those are. I'm not familiar with them. I guess up here they're called Clark's. So it's got Clark's brakes on it. Again, they are disc brakes. These look to be 125 millimeter rotors. Very common, very typical on your, I'm going to say, entry mid-level trail bikes. And when I say entry mid-level, a bicycle like this with these components, if you were going to go to a bike shop, you would probably pay, I'm going to say probably in the $600 to $800 price point. That's probably what you could expect to pay for this level of components. The minute you throw a motor on it, the minute you put this hub drive on it, you're instantly shooting the price up to well over $1,000. And there are some things about this bike that make it actually more worthy of that $2,000 price point than you might think. So again, let's go ahead and get this thing fully assembled. But kind of an inside joke right here. When it is shipped to you, the stem, which is this piece right here, is backwards. You actually have to flip this thing around because the crown, or the brace on your fork right here, is always facing forward. Some people may understand why I'm saying that, some people may not. But yeah, this is essentially how it comes whenever you want to unbox it. So we're going to go and get the wheels mounted up, or at least the front wheel mounted up. We're going to take a look at the other side of it and go over this thing fully assembled. Okay, so we have the bike fully assembled. It didn't take very long. Now, this is definitely one of those things to where if you haven't put together a bike that uses, I'm just going to say, semi-experienced equipment and components, you probably want to take it to a bike shop. And the reason for that is it's very, very important that you torque things down correctly. You don't want to over-tighten things, and you certainly don't want to under-tighten things. But there's a lot of components that have to be assembled properly, and they usually will put the specs of how tight things have to go. For instance, the stem here is supposed to be tightened to 8 Newton meters, whereas The handlebar is supposed to be tightened to 6 Newton meters. And if you don't have the proper torque wrench for this type of application, again, you might get it wrong and you may end up stripping things out or making the bike, you know, where you think things are tight enough when in fact they're not. You just want to make sure that you get it done properly. That said, what do you think? So the first thing I can honestly tell you is that the bike has a pretty nice aggressive stance to it. I'm not exactly sure what the geometry of the front is. I think most folks looking for a bike in this price point probably won't care too much about the geometry of the bike, and that's essentially the angles, right? The angle of the front fork, the angle of the seat tube, the angle of your down tube, different things like that. So the geometry, in my opinion, on a bike like this doesn't really matter. What does matter, though, are the quality of components, what type of components you have. Now, first and foremost, this is an e-bike, so you really can't compare this to bikes that may have slightly better components but might be at a slightly lower price point, because the minute you add the motor, the battery assembly, and all the electronics to it, you've really elevated a bike from being a $600 or $700 bike to being $2,000 and beyond, because that stuff is really expensive. Now, the process of assembling this wasn't difficult at all, but I've also assembled, you know, over 100 bikes, so this really isn't that difficult for someone who's had experience. So let's talk about the bike a little bit. First of all, it doesn't look bad at all. It's actually a very, very modern bike in terms of what I'm looking for from a hardtail, which means it doesn't have rear suspension, and the geometry of it. The components, you know, I haven't had a chance to glance at the components yet. I do know that there have been crazy supply chain shortages in components, so brand names are a little harder to come by. But this does have a Shimano cassette in the back. It is the Shimano Atlas, which is not a bad entry-level component set for this thing. So your derailleur in the back is the Atlas. The front is the Tourney derailleur, which is also Shimano. This is what appears to be a 21 speed. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 in the back and there's 3 up front. So yeah, you got a 24 speed bike right here. But that brings me to the topic that I've been kind of postponing here, and that's the fact that this bike, being an e-bike for $2,000, is a heck of a bargain. Let me explain why. There's very few people who get into bicycling, especially when it comes to trail biking or mountain biking, that don't get a bike and start upgrading it the minute they get it. The challenge with a lot of bikes, especially if you just go to like Walmart or Target and you pick up their bikes, even some of their higher end bikes, aside from a few that they've recently started carrying, they do not allow you to upgrade much. You may be able to find like a new saddle post, you may be able to find new tires, I don't know. You're not going to find a heck of a lot. New pedals, perhaps. But on this bike, man, just about everything's upgradable, to be honest with you. So, you know, for $2,000, you get reasonable components. You get an e-bike. You get something with a name brand front shock. I'm not going to say that that this is the top of the line or it's anywhere near that, but this shock alone is a couple $100. You're not going to have a heck of a lot of adjustment capabilities with a coil sprung front fork. But again, overall, it's a pretty well-equipped bike for $2,000, especially considering it's an e-bike. And let me tell you exactly the things that you could upgrade on it if you wanted to. You could easily upgrade to a better fork. And it appears to be a straight head tube, but there are still a lot of forks available from RockShox and several other brands that still use a straight steer tube up here. And you could easily upgrade this fork to a much better gas fork if you wanted. You could easily upgrade the seat post as well as the saddle. You could easily upgrade the handlebar grips. These are clamp-on grips, so that is really nice, and they're dual clamp-on grips. So you have a clamp bolt here and a bolt right here, which clamp them on. So that is really nice. You have great grips on it. I am not familiar, again, with Clark's hydraulic disc brakes, but you have your Shimano shifter here. But the fact that they're hydraulic disc brakes and not mechanical disc brakes is a huge perk. There's still a lot of $500 and $600 trail bikes that have mechanical disc brakes, even from bike shops. The pedals, easily upgradable, and by all accounts, you should be able to upgrade your whole crank assembly right here if you wanted to. For me, I always like a one-by, which means just one speed up here. Remove this whole derailleur up front. It removes your shifter on this side, and you just don't have to deal with a shifter on that side at all. What else? You probably aren't going to do much by way of upgrading your wheels. You could probably upgrade your tires, but the tires on here are Kenda tires, so they're actually pretty good quality tires. But if you wanted to upgrade to a better wheel, you might be stuck with it, because these are standard skewer mounted wheels, and the front one is slightly upgradable, but the back one has the hub motor built into it, so you're not going to be able to do a lot there. And these look as if they are, let's check out the size, 27.5-inch tire wheel assembly. So this is a modern size bike in terms of the wheel and tire size. This is a medium frame bike, I believe, and I don't think they offer it in any other size. So medium is just about the only size they're going to have this in. And I believe you can go up to about 6 foot tall, maybe a little taller than that, be possibly comfortable on this. And you could probably be as short as about 5'5" to comfortably fit on it, maybe a little shorter than that, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a pretty nice bike. I like the fact that it's so upgradable, because for me, I have enough components sitting in my garage that I could easily throw like $600 worth of stuff on here in a second, just with spare components that I have, and this would easily be a much more capable bike. And that's the nice thing about something like this. You get into it, if you want to upgrade it, you can. If you don't want to upgrade it, you haven't put a ton of money into a bike, and you're still getting something pretty nice. The battery's dead. I'm going to charge the battery up, and I'm going to take it for a spin in the next video, but I wanted to give you a good comprehensive view of my opinion of this bike. From a value perspective, I actually think it's a pretty dang good value. Once you get it, if you have no bike experience, I would definitely take it to a bike shop and have them assemble it for you, just so you know everything's assembled correctly. If you're into watching YouTube videos, then you can probably assemble it yourself, no problem at all. Just be sure you have the torquing tools to get everything spec'd properly, and then have fun. Again, the next video with this bike, I'm going to take it out for a spin, but I just wanted to give you my overall impression and overview of it today, plus unboxing it and going over some of the components. I do know that they have a Bluetooth app that you can pair to the bike, and you can actually kind of monitor what you're doing. You can monitor how far you've been riding, how fast you've been riding, how many calories you're burning, things like that. So that's going to be really cool to mess around with that app next time we get the bike out. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.